Our scripture today is from the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour."
I almost forgot what I was going to say there for a minute. Because this story that we just heard really bugs me. I find it really annoying. It bugs me. I'll tell you why. It was lovely reading, very well read. The story just kind of bugs me, because I have lots of questions. And here's the thing about this story. You probably have already heard this story before. We tell it lots. It's only in Matthew's gospel, but we tell it lots because it's a be ready story. And the context in which Jesus tells this story in Matthew is that the disciples have asked, when is this whole second coming thing going to happen? You know, Jesus is coming back, and there'll be the end of the world and judgment and all that good stuff. You know, that stuff that we really like to talk about a lot, because, you know, that's scary. They want to know what's that all about. And so Jesus is telling them these stories, and this is the one about you need to be prepared. And we almost always hear this story in that context. Be prepared, because you don't know when, but at some point, the end is going to happen. The world's going to end. There'll be all that horrible stuff happening and fighting and people dying and stuff. And then Jesus will appear with the heavenly host and, you know, crush everybody, and judgment will happen. And the people who have been good will go to the good place, and the people who haven't been good will go somewhere else. That's what's going to happen. So be ready. Oh. And by the way, I'm going to tell you how you can be ready. So make sure you listen to me very closely and do what I say. That's how I've always heard this story. Because that's the context in which we tell this story. The end is coming. Be ready. I have questions about this story, though, because it's not really, with all due respect, it's not a really good story. Well, first of all, it's not a really good story for us because we don't get this whole context of the village having to be ready for the bridegroom, and because it's a whole village thing and the way they did weddings in those days that nobody remembers like 2,000 years ago, do they? No? Okay. Just want to be sure, because we don't really understand all that, first of all. Secondly, why is the bridegroom late? If God's time is best, scripture quote, and God knows all things, and God knows the best time for everything, why is Jesus late? What is delaying Jesus? Wouldn't Jesus arrive at just the right time? Not going to tell you when that is, but just the right time, as opposed to the bridegroom was delayed. Why? What do you do when you come to somebody's wedding that's supposed to start at 2 o'clock and they don't show up at 2 o'clock? Fortunately, that never happens here. People are always on time for weddings here. But don't you start to get, like by 20 after 2, don't you start to get a little annoyed? I mean, hey, we've been sitting here, it's hot. Then it gets to be 3 o'clock, the wedding was supposed to start at 2, and you're like, what's going on? I'm leaving. And then turns out the wedding has to start 3 hours later because they had to fix bride's dress because she was 9 months pregnant. But never mind, that's a different story entirely. That's actually a true story. I played for a wedding once that started 3 hours late because they had to fix bride's dress. Not making that up, honestly. True story. They drove off in one of those vans that had a naked person painted on the side of it. Anyway, lovely people, though. Lovely people. You can't make stuff like that up. A true story. But why? Why? If Jesus knows, God knows everything and Jesus knows the best time, why is Jesus late? Why is that? Why does the story begin with, there were 10, 5 were wise and 5 were foolish? You already know something bad is going to happen to the 5 foolish ones. And you know that that's going to happen because they're foolish. Not because maybe they assumed the wedding would start on time. Not because maybe they couldn't afford as much oil as the other 5 for their lamps. Not because maybe they forgot to bring more oil. It's because they're foolish. So the next time you lose your keys or you forget something at home, I guess you're just foolish. This story bugs me. Well, but then there's more, right? There's more. The bridegroom does arrive, and what happens? Do the ones who have oil share with those who don't? No. They say, go and get your own. How un-Jesus-like is that? Jesus is all about sharing with everybody. If you have whether you have lots or not, share with others. And if you have to make some sacrifices for that, that's okay. You should share. That's what's important. Take care of others. And what happens in this story? Not that at all. And then the 5 that didn't have oil go to buy more. They come back. The door's locked. They're excluded from the wedding. Since when did Jesus exclude people? This story is totally un-Jesus-like. Well, it's actually kind of about us, really, isn't it, though? So maybe that's okay, but it's totally un-Jesus-like. But if you ignore all that stuff and put it in the context of the end is coming, you should be ready, I guess it's okay. Is it? Really? Is it? Because all it does is tell you to sit around and wait. In fact, in some tellings of this story, all of the bridesmaids fall asleep. All of them, not just the 5 who are foolish, but all of them. And then they wake up because bridegroom's coming, and the 5 who have oil for the lamps, and off they go. What if Jesus isn't coming some random time in the future and is delayed? What if Jesus is here right now? Think about it. We always tell this story. In fact, I'm going to side with those who think the end is near. Because we always tell this story in the context of the end times. It's called, the eschatology is the fancy name for that, right? Talking about the end times. And we got another fancy name because the second coming is often referred to as a parousia. That specifically means the second coming of Jesus. So you put those two things together and you get the end of the world, Jesus comes, everyone's judged. Think of all the people who say we are in the end times. Look at the world. Look at what's going on in the world. We're in the end times. Last Sunday, somebody walked into a church and killed people. The one place where love ought to be shown most was momentarily defeated by hate. Momentarily, but momentarily defeated by hate. Think of all the places in the world where people are suffering through violence and oppression and all of those things. How could this not be the end times? The end is near, folks. Actually, that's not entirely true. I think the end is now, because it's also the beginning. I'll come to that in a second. The point is, there are lots of things in the world right now that could certainly fill the bill as the end is near. And there are lots of people who think that's it. We're near the end because look at the world. And usually we shout them down and say, no, look at all the good stuff in the world. Look at all the good stuff. What if the end, being the beginning, isn't a bad thing? What if this is the end and the beginning? What if Jesus is here now? not coming at some time in the random time in the future. What if Jesus is here now? We look at all those little moments of acts of random. We even call them random acts of kindness, as if kindness should be random. All those little things that happen in the world, when something terrible happens, and then somebody good does something. When something terrible happens and there's someone there to care for those people. When something happens and somebody stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves. We look at that as just a moment. What if that moment happens all the time? What if we're just not seeing it? What happens? What if we just think those little lights, momentary lights in the darkness, are people with their lamps waiting? What if that wasn't that? What if that was actually Jesus? What if the time for waiting is over because Jesus is here? In you and me. What if instead of thinking we're still waiting for that moment, and let's be honest, sometimes we're still waiting for that moment because we're looking around at all the people that we think ought to be judged and go to the not nice place, and they're going to get theirs, right? Yeah. I know you do, because I do too. We all do. But here's the thing, they're not. What if Jesus is here now in each of us? What if we acted like the waiting is over and the time for doing is now? Wouldn't the world be a different place? We wouldn't be yelling at other people just because they're different. We wouldn't be mad at other people and saying horrible things about them just because they didn't agree with us. We wouldn't be invading other countries just because we wanted something that they have. Of course, we wouldn't in part because we wouldn't do that, but we also wouldn't in part because maybe we'd be sharing things more. Maybe that kingdom of heaven that we talk about all the time would be here a little faster if we all acted like it was actually here. We spend so much time with this at some time in the distant future, second coming thing. I think we're losing sight of the fact that Jesus is here in each of us, in all of the kindnesses and the kindness and compassion and love that we show to each other. It's just we see it as like little flashing random lights instead of one big light, because it seems to be constantly overwhelmed by the darkness. See if we could believe it all the time, though. If we could do it all the time, think of how quickly the darkness would be overwhelmed. Think of how different the world would be. Think of how much more readily we would care for each other. Think of how less angry people would be, for starters. That's the thing that's bothering me the most about the world right now. It's not that there's crazy people in charge. By the way, there's crazy people in charge. It's not that. It's the anger. You can't just disagree with me. I'm going to be mad at you because you did. You can't just be different than me. I'm going to be mad at you because you are. I'm going to be angry with you, and I'm going to say horrible things. Because we have fine examples of people doing that. And those are the people we look at and that we talk about all the time. What about the fine examples of people who are doing kind, generous, open things? What about those people? Do you know their names? That's the thing. When a horrible thing happens, the first thing we want to know is the name of the person who did it. It is. That's what we want to know. What about the person who was on the receiving end of that? What about the person who stepped in to try and help them? What about those people? What about not just first responders, but neighbors? What about those people? Why don't we know more of their names? Why don't we talk more about people like the Pope instead of Donald Trump? Why don't we? Why aren't we? Why aren't we talking more about kind things that happen in the world? Maybe if we even just talked about them a little bit, it might make them stand out a little bit more, and maybe we might start to notice that that's better than all this horrible stuff. Maybe that might start to be a bigger thing. Maybe if we all treated each other a little bit more nicely, maybe who knows, nations might treat each other a little bit more nicely. I know, you're thinking to yourself, no, that's not going to happen. Why not? Why not? Why not? Instead of just seeing this as another one of those stories that says, wait, something's going to happen. Why aren't we seeing it as a story that says something's happening right now, and you are a part of it? You are a part of it. See, I like to tell this story in a completely, as far as the be prepared because something's going to happen thing, it completely ruins that. But the bridegroom is not only on time, comes during the day, so you don't need to worry about having oil in your lamps. And there's, at last count, 6 things of soup for lunch, so everyone has food, and everyone's having a really good time. And yes, some people are being silly, maybe even a little bit foolish, but they're having a good time. So the wise people are going, you know what? We should be silly too, because they're having a good time. Let's have a good time. And before you know it, everybody's having fun together. Everyone's enjoying life together. Everyone is celebrating life together. This thing that we do, and the church, of course, is masters of this. We stick something on a day and we go, it's such and such a day, right? We have Christmas Day, we have Easter Day, we have all these days. We shouldn't just remember one day. I think it's awesome to have Remembrance Day. I think it's important to have the day. But if we load everything into one day, what happens the other 363, 4, however many there is? What happens the rest of the time? Do we forget? It actually sure seems like we do. What if we could remember every day too? And we could remember not just sacrifices that have been made for us, but why they were made. And the promise that we would not ever let that happen again. And then we did, repeatedly. How do you change that? Here's how you change that. Change this story from waiting to doing. Change this story from someday there'll be judgment. You just wait and see. Sorry, I'm just not pointing at anybody in particular. Someday there'll be judgment, you just wait and see. Change that to Jesus is here now. Let's do something about that. Let's share that. Let's celebrate that. And let's do it every day. Bashaw does this wonderful Angels Among Us thing. This is the 3rd year we've done it now. And this year, the idea is that we've given people these cards, basically, with little boxes on them, suggesting things that you can do. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. But the point of that, this year particularly, is to get people to do things that they haven't done before. The last 2 years, we celebrated things that people are doing. And there was a lot of those. A lot. Because people do lots. This year's a little bit different. We're trying to encourage people to do something a little bit different, maybe step out of your comfort zone, or maybe do something that you might find, hey, that's not hard to do. I'm going to do that all the time now. And that's such a great thing. It only lasts for 30 days, though. So, quick math. How many is that? 335 other days? Right, okay. So there's 335 other days in the rest of the year that you don't have to do anything. You just pack it all into these 30. But that's what we're doing. That's what we do when we say it's such and such day. It's Remembrance Day. You only have to remember one day. You only have to honor these people one day. No, you don't. You need to do it every day. And you need to do not just that every day, but you need to do this story differently every day. Don't wait. Do it now. You can. You can. You absolutely can.